And then he said Stalin killed, and he gave numbers. 10 million people, I think it was, some huge number of people he killed. Or by implication, Marxism killed, because for him, Marxism and Stalin killing were more or less the same.
Real quick question for you. What was Karl Marx's opinion on class warfare? Was he in favor of class warfare, or was he against it? Did he think it was a bad thing? What was Karl Marx's opinion about violence between social classes? Class struggle. Was he for that, or was he against that? Was he someone who was trying to minimize the violence of the working class against the bourgeoisie and the aristocrats? Or was he someone who said it would be good to have more and more of that kind of violence? Real easy question for any Marxist to answer. Let me just ask something. What did Karl Marx say? Marx and Engels together in this case. They co-wrote some of their works, you know. What did Marx and Engels have to say about the French Revolution and the most violent period of the French Revolution, the Great Terror? Did Marx say that that violence was really bad, that should be minimized, that in the future, you know, in the class struggle, that people shouldn't do those bad things that happened in the French Revolution? Was that Karl Marx's analysis of the French Revolution, of the Great Terror? Or did Karl Marx say that in the future the revolution should be more violent? Did Karl Marx criticize the French revolutionaries for trying to stop the Great Terror, from holding back the violence of the Great Terror in the French Revolution? Did Marx say that they should go further, be more violent, be more extreme? Which one was it? And finally, does it count for nothing if a major historical figure like Joseph Stalin, like Lenin, or like Mao Zedong, does it count for nothing in your book if those people are sincerely trying to carry out the precepts and principles of Marxism? If when they draw the dotted line between principle and practice, if they came to these conclusions, does that count for nothing today?
So I criticized that. I explained to him, in case he needed it, that Marxism is a bigger, older thing than Mr. Stalin.
Indeed, a bigger and older thing than Mr. Stalin. Mr. Stalin was born in 1878, December of 1878. Karl Marx died in 1883. Their lives overlap. Okay. Marxism was not some ancient, difficult to understand doctrine during the lifetime of Joseph Stalin. Now, if I were to say to you that Buddhism in Japan really is very profoundly different from Buddhism as it was taught in India during the lifetime of the Buddha, you have to say, well, there's a gap of more than 2,000 years. 2,000 years. And a gap in terms of the translation of languages that I think I can genuinely say to you in the audience, you cannot imagine. You cannot imagine how profoundly difficult it is to get an idea from the philosophy of ancient India, written in Pali, sometimes translated or adapted into Sanskrit, into a language like Japanese, into modern Japanese or ancient or medieval Japanese. Difficult. And 2,000 years, a little bit of a gap, okay? 1883 is the death of Karl Marx. And you know what? There were a lot of people in Moscow who could read German. The gap, linguistically and culturally, within the same century between Russia and Germany, it's not really a very powerful or potent excuse, especially not when you're talking about someone taking a set of political principles and putting them into practice and the results including the devastation of the economy, sometimes starvation, scarcity, and oh yeah, massacres, mass murder, including ethnic cleansing, including attempted genocide.
I tried to remind him that history is full of killings done in the name of things that we don't condemn for that.
Does anyone else want to object here? History is full of mass murder that we don't condemn. Really? That's how you read history? What?
I tried to give him examples that would make him twitch. So I gave examples like, I don't know, Christianity. I reminded him of the Spanish Inquisition, which killed large numbers of people.
So your argument is nobody in their right mind would condemn the Spanish Inquisition, so therefore, why would anyone condemn Marxism? Pooh, and the crowd applauds.
I reminded him of wars in the medieval time in which Christian princes killed each other. Catholics to Catholics, Catholics to Protestants, the whole Reformation, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War. You know, those were long, a lot of people died.
Do you know of any political party anywhere in the world that now claims that the Spanish Inquisition was a good thing? Do you know any political party, current, present day, 21st century political party, that really seriously argues that the 30 Years' War was a good thing? Do you know any political party, anywhere on the spectrum, left, right, or center, that today is making excuses for wars in which Catholics persecuted Protestants or Protestants exterminated Catholics, and they look back on that history and say, wow, this was a positive, this was a good thing, these were massacres, these were mass murders we should make excuses for. Here's the thing. I talk to Marxists, I talk to communists all the time, and they are precisely the people who, just like you, Richard Wolff, want to make excuses for, want to present a positive rationale for mass murder by communist regimes. Lenin, Stalin, Mao Zedong, depending on what flavor of communism they're a part of. Just a few are bold enough to take it all the way and try to back up the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. The Cambodian comes. Some people, they seem to stop short of justifying that mass murder in Cambodia. I don't know why. I mean, in for a penny, in for a pound, right? This is the thing. I think if you took a survey of Christians who are alive today, something like 99.9% would look back on the history you're mentioning and say that's regrettable and bad and wrong. And if you ask them, what elements of Christianity are meaningful to you personally? You know, you're going to get some answers like the Sermon on the Mount, be good to your neighbor. You know, there's cherry picking, there are some elements. It's not really going to be internecine fighting in the Dark Ages, in the Renaissance. This is not really what Christians look back on as the pride and joy of their tradition, and it's not what they're trying to revive today. It's not something they're trying to advance as historically inevitable or morally positive, or for the upliftment of humanity, the way that Marxists, doctrinaire Marxists, must defend and propound class warfare, class struggle, and yes, y'all, mass murder.
So if you want to tell me that killing large numbers of people in the name, say, of Christianity means you shouldn't be a Christian,
why would that be hard to commit to? Yes, you know what? I'm opposed to mass murder. I'm opposed to this kind of internecine violence. So therefore, I'm opposed to any form of Christianity that endorses that or advances that or makes excuses for it. I'm also opposed to any form of Islam that does. I'm also opposed to any form of Buddhism or Hinduism. Yeah, you know what? Challenge accepted there. Challenge accepted there, Professor Wolff. I know you think you caught me in a double bind. Like it would be really difficult for me to commit to a position of being opposed to mass murder for both Christianity and Marxism. Both Christianity and communism. But you know what? I feel right now I'm willing to take that step.
I reminded him, that in the 20th century had two things that it called world wars, in which way more people were killed than Stalin ever managed.
Is anyone going to find this convincing? Well, more people died in World War II than were killed by Joseph Stalin. What if, hypothetically, Joseph Stalin had only killed 1 million people? Would you approve of him then? I wouldn't. I mean, either you think something is wrong and bad in principle, or maybe you think it's good in principle, but unfortunately in practice, it had terrible, unforeseen side effects. In the case of the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin, it's bad both in principle and in practice. But you know what? Let's just pause and think about this excuse being made. Total number of deaths attributable to the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin. Some estimates put that at 15 million. Some estimates put it at 20 million. We're getting into the realm of numbers that are in some ways highly speculative. I don't know, total combat casualties for World War II. I'm looking at 25 million. If you thought it would be really flattering to the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin to compare the number of millions of people he killed or the deaths he's responsible for, his regime is responsible for, to the total number of deaths that Adolf Hitler is responsible for, plus battles taking place all over the world. World War II included Japan. It included some parts of Africa. I mean, it's really not a very fair comparison. But nevertheless, Joseph Stalin looks absolutely terrible in this comparison. It's not flattering in any way.
Those were wars among capitalist countries, fighting over colonies, fighting over trade.
Do you know any political party anywhere in the world that says it was a good thing that England conquered India? Anywhere, left wing, right wing. Do you know anyone who now looks back at that history and says, yeah, this is something we should make excuses for, history of British colonialism in India? Do you know any political party anywhere in the world really says, that transatlantic slave trade, King Charles V of Spain, the genocide in North America, the enslavement of the native peoples there, and then, slaves in Africa and the boats. Do you know any political party making positive excuses for that, positive rationalization for that? I don't. Not even the crazy right-wing lunatics. Believe it or not, if you look at the manifestos of those guys, the guys who actually are responsible for mass shootings in the last year, that's not their line of reasoning at all, bizarrely. The problem here is, Professor Wolff, that you are a member of a school of thought, you are a member of a political tendency called communism that is still to this day actively rationalizing and glorifying violence by communist regimes and the violence of communist revolutions. That's the issue. It's a little bit different. And the connection between your ideology, even if you define it as Marxism rather than communism, and that violence It's not hard to draw the dotted line. Not at all. Now, conversely, if you were to talk about the definition of capitalism, and then you would talk about genocide, there's no clear dotted line from one to the other. There's nothing inexorable, inevitable, or stated, propounded by the ideology of capitalism that would make genocide a good thing. There's nothing in the ideology that binds capitalism, the particular form of government or conquest of the British Empire heading out to conquer and control India. Nothing about, King Charles of Spain trying to get this transatlantic slave trade going.
Am I supposed to say, well, see, capitalism kills? I mean, by his logic, this is as good an argument as he has. So what? If we're going to count the dead, I think you're in trouble. I think it's a crazy metric, but you brought it up, so, I went after him.
It seems so easy for people on the far left to convince themselves that they have the cure for an illness. And even if they can't quite define for us what the illness is or how the cure is going to work, they assure us that there are these books written by brilliant men more than 100 years ago. And if only we could follow the blueprint set down in those books, we could build this perfect hospital that would cure us, not just individually, but would in a sense purify and transform our society. Some of them will tell you that this blueprint for a perfect hospital has never been tried. It's never really been built in this world. But the truth is, they took this blueprint, they built this hospital in Russia, and it was a disaster. It failed. The outcomes were terrible by every metric and every measure, not just mass murder. And another group of people, they took this blueprint and they built this hospital in China, and it failed. And millions and millions of people died. But not just that. The society created was terrible in so many ways by every metric and every measure. And another group of people, they took this blueprint and they tried to build this perfect hospital. They were imagining this cure for the sickness they imagined ruined the society they were a part of. And they tried to build it in Yugoslavia, and they tried to build it in Cambodia, and they tried to build it in Laos. They tried to build it in the Czech Republic again and again and again. And you know what? When things fail, they don't always fail in just the same way. In some places, the hospital failed this way, and some places it failed that way. It collapsed a little bit different each time. But how much perspicacity does it really take to look and say, hey guys, the problem, it isn't just the construction workers. It isn't just the execution. If you go back to the plan, if you look at the blueprint, there's something fundamentally wrong here. There's a reason why this ideology and this plan has been linked to mass murder, repression, starvation, again and again and again. And yeah, you know what? Obviously, some of the problems crept into the hospital after it was built. I mean, let's just say the hospital had a rodent infestation. Well, maybe that wasn't in the blueprint. Maybe that wasn't the plan. Maybe there were some forms of corruption that came in afterwards. But what you have to ask yourself at this point in 2019 is, why would you want to be one of the people making excuses for mass murder? I don't know any other theater of political discussion in which it's necessary to move past the stage of saying, hey, this guy is making excuses for mass murder. I don't know any other theater of political debate where it's necessary to move past that and deal with the details of the particular rationale of the particular excuses. Professor Wolff, shame on you.